Hey, beautiful people. Namaste. Shakti here. So, I'm continuing on today with my series of lives on Rapture for Men, a guide to women and their sexuality. I'm going through my book, Rapture, a guide to sexual and spiritual awakening for women, and relaying the information in each chapter for men who might be interested in this for themselves and their partners. So today's chapter that I'm speaking to, we're on chapter 5, and it's called Know Thyself, Knowledge is Power. Really important topic for men and women. And of course, you're already going to know what I'm going to speak to, I assume. It's that we have not been given information or education about our bodies, about our sexuality, about our arousal pathways. So we've not received any kind of useful, adequate education or information, typically, unless you've got a mum like me, in which case you're getting a lot of the right education. But typically, that's not what's been happening for us women. And of course, because of all the things that I've mentioned in the previous lives, especially the shame around the body and the shame around sexuality and this whole religious indoctrination that the body and our sensuality is sinful, there's kind of even this fear of going near or looking or exploring, this guilt, this tentativeness, this shyness around the most natural, the most beautiful thing, which is our physical bodies and their capacity for pleasure. Like, can you see how the conditioning, how the programming has so powerfully cut us off from our pleasure, our power, and our true nature through this indoctrination of sin and shame? It's so clear to see once you see it. It's kind of funny, but looking out into the world, I can see how most people are still locked into those beliefs, unfortunately and sadly. So most women, and I would say probably most men, don't really know or understand, don't have a deep relationship with their bodies, their full pleasure potential, and their particular arousal pathway. And if you don't have that, then of course, how are you going to be able to experience the ultimate possibilities, which actually there is no limit to what's possible. Let me tell you that if you're watching right now, there is no limit, there's no end point. So for a woman, the pleasure that you are capable of, women, is infinite and forever expanding. There is no limit to it. I really want you to understand that. I also want to speak to, the models of education that we have been given, which are like, so for example, the sex ed that is now finally being given in schools. My kids have told me about it. They're young adults now, late teenagers. It's very inadequate, and it focuses on basically putting the living fear of God into you that you might get pregnant or pass on an STD. So in that environment, it's all about fear of getting pregnant, fear of passing on an STD, right? There's no mention of pleasure. There's no mention of all kinds of details about the actual physiology of the body. Things are missed out, like details about the clitoris or female ejaculation, for example, or the fact that men can orgasm without ejaculating. That's not, and there's no context given for love, for relationship, for the emotional, physical, mental impacts of lovemaking, because of course sex isn't something that happens in a vacuum, and most particularly for women. I know it's easier for men to separate things into compartments, but for women everything is related. So your sexuality isn't something that is separate to the rest of you. It relates and correlates to every area of your being and your life. Right? So it's not something you can just put into a box or a vacuum and separate out and think, that's the little bit of my life where I'm sexual, and then it's separate to everything else. It's not. It completely impinges upon and is affected by everything else. So we have sex ed at school, which is rubbish and very limiting and fear-based. We might have messages if we're in a church or religion, we'll be given messages about sinfulness and shamefulness and dirtiness and wrongness and, sluttishness and whorishness and all of those, setting up the duality that I've also spoken about already, this kind of, this horrible tension between like the whore and the virgin archetypes, which is so imprinted on men and women out there, just so imprinted. So that's what religion does. That's another form of education and information. And then we have culture, popular culture, where there are all these completely unrealistic representations of lovemaking. Like, pretty much every TV show or movie that I've seen where this is depicted, it's like the woman is aroused in literally 15 seconds and is penetrated within 30 seconds, and then it's all over. Like, oh my fucking God, that is so the opposite of how most women are aroused and like to make love. Like, it's very, very unrealistic, to the point of being dangerous, I would say, in setting up expectations, within men, that things can be that rapid and that's going to be in any way satisfying. And for women, setting up the expectation that they should be responding so quickly and like going into ecstasies and screaming, within 30 seconds of being approached by somebody, which is ridiculous. It's so unrealistic. And then kind of beyond that, of course, a lot of young people especially, and again, this is a topic that creates a lot of shame for people, and it's all kind of underground and secret and hidden, but let's just name it. Like, porn is a huge, huge business. So obviously a lot of people are using it and accessing it. And again, I'm not a user now. I have read in my, in my younger years, that was part of my sex education. Like, I found my dad's pornography. He had loads of books, not many magazines, mostly books. That's, that was what I was exposed to from my teenage years. And there was a porn mag going around school. That's kind of what I saw. And, so that created certain programs for me. But then, like, once I discovered Tantra, all of that basically fell away for me, because it just wasn't necessary. I was having so much ecstasy and pleasure without any need for that kind of external stimulation. Just my desire for it just wasn't there anymore. But it's a big part of what people are exposed to. And again, although, as I say, I'm not a user, so I can't comment too much on what there is out there. But just speaking to what I have seen and known, I would say, again, in most cases, it's extremely unrealistic representation of what is possible and what happens and what is real in terms of the kinds of bodies that are shown, the kinds of genitals that are shown. Of course, they're all like these immaculate, perfect bodies that are not representative of most people. And, there's plastic surgery that happens to change how things look. So again, it's not representative of the average or normal woman or man. And then the way that pleasure and seduction and arousal is represented is often typically not at all how things actually go. So, there's a lot of false education and illusion that creates fear, that creates distortion, that creates shadow, that emphasizes shame and hiddenness, right? So we've got all of that. And then we've got women and men, but I'm talking about women who don't really understand and know their bodies, their pleasure pathways, and also aren't really familiar with their own psyche, with their own emotional wounding. Because of course, like I said in the very first live, this plays a very big part in who we're attracted to, what turns us on. It's not neutral. It's always what turns us on, and our arousal pathways will always be directly related to experiences we've had in our childhood that are not sexual at all. And they're part of our psyche's drive to find healing and wholeness, right? So we think that our sexuality is neutral, and it's not. It's conditioned, it's programmed, and it's directly connected to wounds and issues and traumas that have happened to us in our younger years. So that's why knowing your erotic her story or history is fundamental to your growth in this arena, and to claiming your sovereignty and your empowerment in this arena, so that then when you go into relating, when you go into intimacy, you understand what parts of you may be getting triggered or activated and playing out, right? And so then as women who are looking to be sovereign in this realm, we stop blaming or expecting the other to fulfill our needs. We take full responsibility. Most women aren't doing that. That's what I'm here to change, and people like me are here to change. So knowing yourself is about understanding your psyche, your history, your herstory, as well as fully knowing and understanding your anatomy and physiology, your arousal response, which is absolutely unique, and fully claiming that without any kind of shame or belief that there's something wrong with that. You know, we are all, like every single body, every single woman is absolutely unique in how she looks and what turns her on. There are like some really big general factors that work, and in general I would say what tends to be the issue is that men approach women like they're men and women approach men like they're women, and what needs to happen is an understanding that we're actually completely different and often completely opposite in what is needed and what works, right? And even now, like still when as women we go to the doctors, when we go to the doctors with issues to do with our bodies and our sexuality, there's such a lack of understanding of the female body, female arousal, female sexuality. It's still so little understood. So it's no wonder that women don't really know, but part of our journey as women on this path is to educate ourselves, to familiarize ourselves with our bodies, with our sexuality, with our genitals, with all of it, and to really discover our uniqueness and own it, right? You know, no woman's genitals are the same. No woman's arousal pathway is the same. But there are some things that are kind of, I can say as a generalization, which is well known and documented, which is that, for example, to go from naught to orgasm for a woman can be 3 to 5 times longer than it takes a man. That's kind of a generalized common knowledge. Although, interestingly enough, when we're talking about lesbian sex, that gap is much shorter. So there's something going on there in terms of women knowing their bodies and being comfortable in their bodies with another woman, which doesn't always happen with men in heterosexual lovemaking. So I find that really interesting. So we take longer generally to reach orgasm with a man, and quite a bit longer, and our needs and desires are entirely different, generally speaking. And again, this is a piece of wisdom that I picked up from Ma Ananda Sarita. If you think of a woman as a spiral that you approach from the outside in, and you think of as a man as a spiral that you approach from the inside out, you know, so completely different, ending up in the same place. But, you know, what I've noticed is that men will tend to go for the bits that they fetishize or obsess with straight away. Whereas for most women, that's the last thing that we want. We want the slow build, the seduction, the foreplay, which I really don't like the use of that word because it makes it sound like something it's kind of an optional thing to do before penetration. But in fact, what is commonly termed foreplay is a necessary and essential part of lovemaking. Also, the whole focus on penetration is a very masculine thing. There's plenty of ways of becoming orgasmic, experience heightened states of pleasure and ecstasy that do not involve penetration at all. And if you're interested in the tantric way of being intimate, then that whole focus has to go entirely. Not, you know, it's not that there is no penetration, but it's like the focus on penetration and orgasm as quickly as possible is a very kind of immature masculine way of having sex, basically, and it's not satisfying for women. Just to make that really clear. Oh gosh. So I'm just going to look at my notes to see what I want to say and see what I've missed out. If you think of, I kind of wrote this in my notes, think of a car. Like if you got a car, you would get a user's manual, right? So if you're a man and you want to understand female anatomy, female arousal, then there are so many books that you can get to understand these things in a general way. And I'm just going to show you like a few of the books off my bookshelf. Female Ejaculation and the G-Spot, Sex for One, Woman's Anatomy of Arousal, Orgasm Unleashed, Pussy Reclamation, Come As You Are, Vagina, Yoni Massage, Lingam Massage. All right, that's just a few of the books from my bookshelf that have been part of my studies. So like, there's no excuse these days for not knowing. The information is so widely available for those of you who really want to understand how women's bodies work, how women's arousal pathways work, which are not, it's not the same as yours, it's different. And if you want the best in your lovemaking and intimacy, then you need to educate yourselves. And of course, women, I'm speaking to you as well. You need to educate yourselves. And when I speak about this in my chapter, Know Thyself, Knowledge is Power, for example, I invite you as one of the practices to get your hand mirror and take a look. Like take a look and explore and, literally discover your anatomy deeply and intimately. Discover what works for you, what doesn't. Discover how you look. And if any kind of shame comes up in that practice, then that's going to show you and highlight you where there is healing to be done. Because looking at yourself in the mirror naked, looking at your genitals, should be the most beautiful, honoring, divine, sacred experience. And that's the kind of the level of self-intimacy that is needed to claim your sexual power fully, to be able then to share it with another. And of course, the same goes in reverse. So yes, you might want to get a few users manuals to educate yourself, but then it's discovering your uniqueness. There's such a big kind of culture of comparison, self-judgment, and particularly for women, finding ourselves wrong and lacking in some way. Like there's something wrong with my parts are too big, my parts are too small, my parts are too hairy, my heart, all this kind of nonsense. And once again, this self-judgment and comparison is a vestige of the patriarchal system, which is there to diminish the feminine and diminish womanhood. And again, this requires healing and inner work to release these negative beliefs that there's something not right or not good enough. Let me tell you, there are so many beautiful shapes and sizes, and they are all perfect. They are all beautiful. And again, this requires our honoring, it requires our respect, and it requires our devotion. If you've been watching a lot of porn, you're going to probably have some expectations or ideas in your head of how things should look or naturally are that are quite distant from most women's bodies. So, that's just something to be aware of. And this is such, just like for you, for a woman, this her yoni is the most vulnerable part of her body. And just think of the tenderest part of your being, the tenderest part of your heart, the tenderest part of you, and how you would wish to approach and honor that most tenderest part of you. Right? With respect, with care, with tenderness, with listening, with sensitivity. The other thing to say is that not only is every woman's physiology and arousal pathway unique and different, it's never the same from one day to the next. So it's not like you can get one of these user's manuals, one of these books, study it, and then think, I know what to do now. I have to do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and then it's all going to work, right? Just have to let that go. Yes, education is vital. You need to be educated, you need to be informed, you need to fully understand like where all the holes are, like where the clitoris is and how big it expands and all these things you need to know. But then understand that a woman changes through her monthly cycle. She will go through completely different phases of being open, being closed, feeling more horny, feeling less horny, and so on and so forth. The secretions change, the breasts change, sensitivity changes. Know about this, woman, know about this. And if you're a man who likes women, know about this and don't judge it or criticize it or make her feel bad for it. This is how she's designed. And this is fundamental to her power, her wisdom, her intuition, her spiritual gifts, and her true fullness of being. And if a woman is in touch with these aspects of herself, she's going to be like the greatest goddess that she possibly can be. When she's disconnected from these aspects of herself, she will be less empowered. So as a man with a woman, you want to empower your woman to become aware of her cycle, to honor her body. So any kind of speech that is dishonoring or disrespectful is just going to diminish her level of opening to you and her level of feeling good in herself. And for a woman to open to you, she has to feel really good in herself, right? Of course, this is our responsibility. So as women, we're not going to choose partners who consistently make us feel shit. We're going to leave them behind and choose guys who really understand how to honor the woman. So we're different at every part in the cycle, and then we're different at particular points in our life cycle that are really, really huge initiations. So for example, pregnancy, everything changes. The body changes massively, right? Massive changes a woman's going through. Childbirth, oh my God, massive change. Did you know? I didn't know. Like, this is how naive I was, and this is what actually put me onto this path, because I didn't know. And then I had this horrible experience that was a complete shock to me. For many women, in the process of childbirth, the vagina tears, or even it can even tear all the way through to the anus. I didn't know that. I had no clue that could happen. Honestly, had no clue. And it happened. And of course, as a result of that, having sex was painful, difficult. Do you know how heartbroken I was that I couldn't enjoy something I'd been enjoying so much until that point? It broke my heart. I had to grieve that. And of course, don't worry, everything healed and got better eventually. But the lack of my husband's understanding for that was what drove us apart, actually. So please understand, like, the trauma that can happen to that body part for a woman, and the trauma and grief that there can be when she's not able to enjoy her sensuality can be massive. And the way that you as man approach that makes all the difference between whether she's able to open to you or not. And of course, understanding that, once again, it's not all about penetration. It's not all about penetration and getting to orgasm as quickly as possible. There's so much more. There's so much more. There's so much more. Tantra is about that much more and so much more. So pregnancy, childbirth, lactating, our desire is going to change. What we like is going to change. It's not going to stay the same. And then, of course, menopause, another huge, huge change for a woman's body. Personally, my belief and experience is that is not at all the end of anything. But for some women, it creates very significant physiological changes. But again, those can be navigated with loving awareness, with sometimes natural or sometimes with allopathic medical support, and also through prior practices, such as using a yoni egg, such as all the kinds of practices that I teach in my work for women, which encourage the toning and activation of the muscles in that pelvic region. Again, men, that toning of your muscles is just as important for you, by the way, if you want to learn to control your ejaculation and master your sexuality. So, there's a lot that we can do to navigate that significant change. But it's not just a physiological change, it's an emotional change, it's a mental change. And it doesn't mean the end, but it does mean adapting and flowing with changes in your body, in your life, in your psyche, and in your emotions. So you need to know about this. We all need to know about this and to be open about it, to talk about it. Again, if there is shame, what the heck are you doing with someone who feels ashamed to share this kind of thing? You know, it's part of our intimacy, it's part of our relating, it's part of life. So we change all the time. For men, I want to say, if you're approaching your lover or your partner to get something or to make something happen or to do something to her, you're not going to get the best from her. And really, you know, in a way, you're treating that as a transaction rather than as an exploration of something very sacred and hugely powerful in terms of the potential there for true communion and ecstasy and love, right? And a woman with any awareness and with any sensitivity is going to feel that straight away. If you're coming to get something, if you're coming to make something happen, she's going to feel that right away, and it's a massive turn off. So education, yes. Self-awareness, yes, for men and women. About yourself, about the other. And of course, if you're with a partner, sit down, lie down, do a show and tell, get out the books, explore, have a laugh. Like, ooh, what does it feel like when I touch here? What does it feel like when I touch here? Oh, I didn't even know that my little toe was so sensitive. I didn't even know that my left shoulder blade was so erotic, right? Explore, show, tell. And guys, here's something really important for you to know. Don't take it personally. Like, there can be so much ego attached to this, I think, particularly for men. Like wanting to get it right, wanting to be the best, wanting to know everything when actually you don't know everything and there's always more to learn. So become humble, become a servant, become a student. And in that way, you're going to enhance everybody's experience 1,000-fold. Rather than coming in with this idea of how things should be and what it needs to look like and what you want and what you need, and this is how it's always been, not going to work. The reality of tantric lovemaking is that you're present, and when you're present, there is no past, there is no future, there is only now, and there is the present moment discovery of what's truly alive and what truly wants to happen. And that's what is asked to be honored. And when you can honor that, you know, that's when you have the most profound experiences. Not when you're looking to make something happen, not when you're trying to do something to somebody, when you're just present. And of course, presence is the very opposite energy of the feminine, which is Shakti, which is moving, dancing, ecstatic, joyful, blissful, loving energy, which is moving emotion, and presence is stillness. It's the very opposite of that. But the more present you are, the more that energy is stirred within the feminine and within the woman. Just going to check my notes, see if there's anything I've missed out. Yeah, urban myths. There are so many urban myths. So if you've gotten your education, like I said, from porn or from your mates, or like, you know, the urban myths. I was watching a program myself. I'm continually educating myself. I never stop learning, right? I don't want to ever stop learning or growing. There's always more, and science advances and knowledge advances. And so that, like, I recently discovered this whole thing, like the idea of the hymen is a complete myth. It's a complete myth. This whole idea of like, if the hymen breaks, then you're not a virgin anymore. It's such a myth. So that's one myth. Another myth is that women don't ejaculate. It's a myth. A lot of women do. Not every woman does, but a lot of women do. You know, there are all these other urban myths. So educate yourself, inform yourselves, and the best form of education, of course, is to explore your own body and then to share what you know with your partner. But until you have that self-knowledge and that self-awareness, and as I said before at the very beginning, not just about your body, but about your psyche and your history or your herstory, you're going to go into situations blind and not empowered. And when you're empowered, then you're able to say no, yes, ask for what you need, explore and show what is the best thing for you, whilst always, of course, leaving space for the unknown. For the exploration of pure presence and energy meeting in the now moment. And that's when the magic really happens. Am I going to say that? Yeah, I guess I'm going to conclude on a final point. The final point I'm going to make is that for me, One of the most powerful experiences that I ever had so far is resting with a lover in absolute stillness. Both of us in absolute stillness, in absolute presence, no thinking, no trying to make anything happen, no searching, no movement, actually. You know, and this was a pause moment in a fairly prolonged period of lovemaking, but in that stillness, in that dropping down into bliss and expansiveness, there was the most profound sexual spiritual experience I've ever had, one of the most in my entire life. Wasn't about technique, wasn't about trying to make something happen, wasn't about pressing a particular part of my body. No. It was about being fully present in the heart, the body, the energy field together with absolutely zero expectation or attempt to make anything happen. Absolutely profound. Know thyself, educate yourself. There are so many resources out there. Why? Why would you do it? I just heard someone ask, why would I want to do that? Because there's always more that you can learn. And if you want the best from your partner, why wouldn't you? Yeah, it's going to take effort, but like, how fun and how boring to stay stuck in the same old. And of course, there is this resource as well. So, yeah, that's my sharing for today. Yeah, I'm going to continue on tomorrow. I can't remember what the theme is. We'll see when I start. And if you've got questions, pop them below. If you want to explore working with me in some way, a couple of things. I have a monthly women's group, the Rapture study group. Once a month we meet and I guide you through the practices from this book and beyond. It's a tantric practice community for women, once a month on a Wednesday evening online on Zoom. The next session is the 27th of April. I also have a mixed group, the Tantric Temple, also online, also once a month. And the next one of those is Wednesday, the 20th of April. Another beautiful opportunity to be guided. I'm going to guide you through meditations, embodiment practices, awareness, ecstatic embodiment, all kinds of ways, and also the opportunity to ask me questions. Tantric Temple, that's it. And ladies, if you're watching this, I'm going to be launching another live version of the course that goes with this book in May, so look out for the details of that. I'll put my website link below, and thanks for watching and being here. I hope it was really helpful. Lots of love.